Welcome to No Place Like Home, the radio show coming to you on WRXB 1590 AM and Pinellas County Connection TV. This program is presented to you as an opportunity to hear information that can help you fulfill the dream of owning your very own home. We also share information about upcoming special events and programs to help you enjoy the good life in Pinellas County, as well as other items of interest. The sponsor of this program is the Housing Finance Authority of Pinellas County, which offers the First-Time Homebuyers Program, your key to home ownership, helping people in Pinellas, Pasco, and Polk counties make their dreams of home ownership a reality. I'm Catherine Driver alongside Jane Merlin, your host for today's show. Hi, Jane. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well and hope that you are too.
I am.
We've got a really interesting program today. This is such an important topic for a lot of people in our community, and it's something that may not affect you or may not affect you personally, but it certainly might affect someone you know, and that is the topic of fair housing. And April, of course, is Fair Housing Month, and we want to talk about it in March because there are a couple of really good educational programs coming up that we want people to be aware of, to get on the calendar so that they can participate. And so coming up in a few moments, we'll talk more about that, and we're going to hear from representatives with Pinellas County's Office of Human Rights. Coming up will be Paul Valenti, the director, and Mark Esparza, who's the housing manager. But before we get into today's topic, Catherine, I know you've got a message from our sponsor.
I do. Thank you, Jane. The Housing Finance Authority of Pinellas County is offering its First-Time Homebuyers Program, Your Key to Home Ownership, which helps folks in Pinellas, Pasco, and Polk counties make their dreams of home ownership a reality. The First-Time Homebuyers Program is for individuals who have never owned a home, have not owned a home in the last 3 years, or are veterans. The Housing Finance Authority offers a low rate on its 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, and if you need a little help with down payment and closing costs, we can help you with that also with our Home Key Second Mortgage. To get your key to home ownership, please contact us at 727-223-6419 or visit our website at www.pinellascounty.org/HFA. To reach us for more information or for comments about the show, please call us at that same number, 727-223-6419, or you can send us an email to newhome@pinellashfa.com. You can also watch past shows on the website or catch us on YouTube. Jane?
Great information as always, Catherine. And, you know, we've talked in the past about how a lot of people have the money to pay a mortgage every month, but they may not have the down payment assistance that they need or the closing costs, or it might really deplete a lot of their savings if they were to use some of their own funding. And that's where your program comes in.
Yes, and also taking advantage of that down payment and closing cost assistance, there's a component that requires the home buyer to take a home buyer education class, which teaches you about budgeting and about credit issues and just, things to, be mindful of as a first-time home buyer, things you might not think of or experience as a renter. So it's a great opportunity.
And important, too, you mentioned if you hadn't been a homeowner in the last 3 years, you could still qualify for the program. So even if you've been a homeowner in the past, that education class is still real important to take because so much has changed.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And as Jane mentioned, even if you've owned a home in the past, if you haven't owned your principal residence in the past 3 years, you would qualify as a first-time home buyer under this program. So, do please check out our website or give us a call to see if you qualify. You may, and there's some great opportunities for you.
Yeah, definitely a great program. Well, now it's my pleasure to welcome both of our guests in today. Paul Valenti, as I mentioned before, is the director of the Office of Human Rights. He joined the department in 2012, and prior to joining the county, he worked in Lee County as well as the Connecticut Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. He's a graduate of the University of Connecticut and Quinnipiac. I beg your pardon.
That's quite all right.
I hope I didn't offend all the other graduates out there with my bad pronunciation.
That's fine.
And that's a school of law. He is licensed to practice law in Florida and Connecticut and is admitted before the United States Supreme Court. Mark Esparza is the housing manager for the Office of Human Rights. He joined the county in 1999, been here for a while now. Where he investigated civil rights complaints. He's a certified mediator and investigates claims of discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations under county and federal law. Both are returning guests and always provide us with really important information. So welcome back, Paul and Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Well, Paul, let's start with you and give us a little bit of an overview, if you would, about what the Office of Human Rights is all about and why it's so important for Pinellas County.
Absolutely, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here. The Office of Human Rights exists to protect the residents of Pinellas County from discrimination in three broad areas: housing, which we'll get into detail later, employment, and discrimination in places of public accommodation. That would be restaurants, movie theaters, grocery stores, places and businesses that are generally open and available to the public at large. And our office is there to ensure that in accessing employment opportunities, housing opportunities, or availing themselves of places of public accommodation, people aren't prohibited from accessing those areas for prohibited reasons: their race, their color, their religion, their sexual identity or sexual gender expression, their sexual orientation. These are, and others are reasons why people can't be denied access to either housing, employment opportunities, or places of public accommodation, and we help vindicate their rights.
So it's a tremendous responsibility then looking out for the rights of all citizens in Pinellas County and those public access points, which are huge.
Sure. No, absolutely. And we get a healthy caseload every year of people who unfortunately believe they've experienced these kinds of issues.
Right. Now, I know that the county's TV station runs the calendar of meetings that are taking place in Pinellas County government. And there's always a note at those calendar listings that talks about if you're an individual who needs an accommodation to participate in that meeting, that there are certain provisions provided for them. Can you tell us what some of those might be?
Sure. One of the charges or missions of our office is also ensure that residents that need those reasonable accommodations to be able to participate in government services or programs are afforded those accommodations. So, for example, if a person has a hearing impairment and they'd like to attend a Board of County Commissioner meeting and they want to be able to meaningfully interact or understand what the board is discussing, they might need an American Sign Language interpreter, or simply maybe having subtitles below as the commissioners speak, which I know we've done. It would be forms of reasonable accommodation for that person to meaningfully participate in government services, in government operations. So that's one example. There are others. Allowing a service animal into a government building would be another. It could take multiple forms, but the idea is that people with disabilities are entitled to the same rights of access and service as anybody else in Pinellas County.
So somebody who might need that assistance, the interpreter, or they want to bring their service animal in, they would call your office and arrange that ahead of time?
Absolutely, and we would encourage them at least a week ahead of time so that we can assess what their need is and then work with the relevant agency or program or service to implement that accommodation. If people call the same day, it's going to be impossible. Well, it may be impossible to implement the accommodation request. So we ask that at least a week's lead time so we can work it and make sure they have what they need on the day and time in question.
And then how does that get paid for? Who would pay, for example, for an interpreter?
It's a great question. To allow people with disabilities to meaningfully participate in government operations, to avail of the programs and services, that is a cost that the taxpayers bear. It's not a cost that the person with a disability has to bear. So in the instance of provision of a sign language interpreter, that would be an obligation on the county.
Can you give us some examples of some of the cases that you've been handling recently? And is there one issue that seems to be a little bit more prevalent recently than others?
Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, we deal with a whole gamut of what we call in our work protected classes, or groups of people who are protected from discrimination. And as I said, that could be they wouldn't rent an apartment to me because of my race or my color, or because I'm a single mother with children, minor children. These will all be examples of types or kinds of cases that typically come across or through our office.
And that still happens today?
It still happens today, regretfully.
Wow.
It still happens today. And some of it, at least, is driven by the familial status protections came into being in 1988. And I know for some folks that's quite a while ago now, but there are condos There are apartments that were constructed well before that, and special condos with their bylaws that predate those amendments and still have language to this day, believe it or not, in their governing documents talking about no children. And so we do still to this day see those kinds of issues. But the one, I'm going to yield the floor to my colleague Mark in a second here, because the issue that we see the most of and that my colleague Mark here has to deal with the most is service animals and emotional support animals for persons with disabilities in the housing context. Yeah. That's the biggest, number one issue facing our office day to day.
Yeah. And I'd like to add that when it comes to the complaints, it kind of depends a lot of times on your local population, your demographics. Because over here in Pinellas County, we'll have a lot of adult parks, the 55-plus parks. You'll have a lot of the aging populations that avail themselves of service animals or assistive animals. And so you'll get a lot of those types of cases. And we have a lot of associations, too, that have the power of approval or denial of somebody entering. And so you'll get a lot more types of challenges or types of issues of enforcement. And so here in this area, we'll get a lot of those different types of cases. And it's all varied, really. And so all of us in the industry will celebrate or have a conference or an outreach event or something in which we can connect with the public to give them information about our services or about what their rights are or relief or remedies for themselves. And so every year we'll do something for the public in reaching out. And this year we're going to be having a conference specializing on ESAs, basically assistive animals of all sorts, animals for your physical disabilities, animals for your mental disabilities, and we're going to be having a speaker come down to talk about that, to talk about the sub-issues related to that, and it should be interesting because it's a large part of our caseload. I mean, it's probably half or more of our caseload. And so it's something that's always going on, a lot of challenges going on, and a lot of confusion out there. And so it's a great thing to have that a meet and greet for people to understand what the law is.
Oh, yeah. I know just listening to the radio and watching TV, you see something about that every week, whether it's somebody couldn't get onto an airplane or they couldn't get into a movie theater or what have you. And there's a lot of questions and confusion over, what the appropriate laws are. So it is very good and very timely for you to be having that event, to educate folks on, that very important issue.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the event itself. So it's happening, what was the date?
April 17th. We're going to be having an invited guest come down from a prominent civil rights firm to talk about their perspective, their litigation issues, some of the sub-issues related to service animals, multiple service animals, vaccinations, restrictions on service animals, the type of service animals, alternative to service animals, issues like that we're going to be talking about. And also anybody else that, a Q&A for people to ask questions about and get their answers.
An important part of that, too, is our office necessarily has to be neutral, fair, and objective when we do our investigations. So part of the panel that we're putting together to talk about these issues will include representatives from housing providers, property managers, defense attorneys, so that various perspectives can be put on the table and discussed. So it's not just from our perspective as enforcement agency or just from certain advocacy groups, but really the whole range of how different viewpoints on this issue so we could have a meaningful dialogue.
So who usually would be the attendee at this event?
That's a great question.
Would it be anybody in the housing industry profession, residents?
Yeah. What it's going to be is going to be realtors, right? The persons, the gatekeepers to doing the transaction. You're going to be having property managers, those who work for the associations who have to enforce what the boards tell them to enforce, right? Issuing letters. You're going to have attorneys coming, because they can actually feel the threshold, the culture of when to issue a letter, or what's going to be important, what fact to assess. You also have government officials coming in, the other enforcement agencies. You have the local housing authorities coming, because they need to know this information too, because their residents were going to be availing themselves of these types of rights. And so you have a wide variety, and then you have the association boards themselves, the presidents, the persons on the boards, because they need to know. they're making decisions every single day that impact people. And so it's good for them to sit there in the audience and find out what they need to know before they make the decisions that impact people.
And it's really a modest fee for this conference with all that great information. We were talking earlier. What was the fee?
It's $20 if you register in advance, $25 at the door. And the nice part of it is that customarily every year we afford for the professionals that attend either continuing education credits for the realtors, or for the attorneys who join us we offer CLE credits. We also are going to have a meal as part of that cost. So for those professionals to get 3 or 4 hours of continuing education credits for $20 with a meal, I mean, you can't get that elsewhere. You just can't.
It sounds like a phenomenal opportunity for those who are
I went
impacting. You went.
I went
okay.
last year, Jane. The first show that I did last year was with Paul and Mark, and it was very fascinating to me. And like he said, the price is, you cannot beat that for the kind of information that you get. And it was, the information that I took from that was incredible. I mean, the questions that you can and cannot ask, the information that you can request or you're not to request. I mean, very fine lines, and you really, it's very, very informative and very eye-opening. And the speakers were phenomenal. The food was great. The camaraderie and meeting other folks. It was really a great event, and I really recommend it to anybody. It was top notch. I really enjoyed it.
Well, there's a perfect testimonial for you guys. Wow.
Yes.
And traditionally, we do this every other year. We'll go either, like last year, it was in Pinellas County at the Realtors Organization on Ulmerton. This year, we'll be doing it at the Greater Tampa Area Realtors on Kennedy Boulevard in Tampa. So it's truly a Tampa Bay initiative and consortium of people interested, or groups and organizations interested in advocating and furthering the cause of fair housing that put this together. And in reflection on that, we kind of house it each year, one side of the bay or the other. This year, April 17th, it'll be at the Greater Tampa Area Realtors on West Kennedy. And thank you for that warm endorsement, because it's a great event.
It's
really a great event.
It really
And for
is.
$20, what a great value of information you're going to receive. So how do people register for the program? I'm sure that it's going to be pretty important to do that in advance.
Well, it'll soon be on our website, and it will be on the GTAR's website, because traditionally in the past, they have handled all the processing of credit card payments and registering. And so it's going to be at their website, and it's usually going to be seamless.
Now, talk to us a little bit about the fact that people are going on their daily lives, and they're property owners, landlords, what have you, and they may not even be aware that they are affecting or breaking the law of fair housing. How do they know if they are at risk or if they are indeed breaking a fair housing regulation?
Good question. I guess when we come knocking, really, on their door. But it's going to be complaint generated. That is victim generated. Typically, somebody will come forward to file a complaint with our office alleging that their rights have been violated. And at that point, we're neutral, right? We don't take a side. We don't represent them. We're going to look into the matter. And a lot of times, to answer your question, is that some people may not know. You'll have landlords who will believe that they can impose a rental charge on a service animal. They'll believe they can impose a security deposit on an animal, when in fact they cannot. And you have other persons who might assert that they have a service animal when in fact they really don't necessarily, because they don't meet necessarily the requirements of law. So sometimes you have a lot of confusion out there, and sometimes you don't, about what people are doing. Perhaps sometimes the selective enforcement of rules that persons think that they're doing in a earnest and good faith manner might not be. I mean, it's one of those things where you look at all the evidence, you look at the context of totality, and then you make a decision at that point about what's really going on.
Well, what are some of the range of penalties that can, be levied against somebody who's found guilty of, violating somebody's fair, rights, whether it's, through housing, employment, or with the service animals and such? And, they may not even be aware that they're doing it, but, they could be subject to some, pretty severe penalties.
No, absolutely. If we determine that there is a violation of the law, the next step would be that we would, on behalf of that complaining party, engage the services of a law firm to go out and litigate that case. And the cost, the harm, the charge to a respondent or a housing provider at that point could be pretty significant. It could be the actual damages that the charging party or complainant accrued. It could be, depending on the context, punitive damages. If they've been found to have been engaged in these practices in the past, there could be administrative penalties of $10,000 imposed. Wow. So never mind the cost of an attorney to defend the action in a courtroom, which we all know is not a cheap endeavor. It could be quite significant. And that's why we do the education and outreach, because and we try to underscore this, particularly the condo boards and the property managers. We would much rather educate you and ensure that we don't have problems than to be in a more adversarial setting where now we're investigating an allegation. It makes sense. That's our charge, to eliminate discrimination. So we'd rather have you not engage in these practices from the outset and maybe work ourselves out of employment.
Well, you mentioned that you'll get a complaint that comes into your office. About how long does it take for a typical investigation, kind of from start to end? Is it just a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, years? What is or it varies?
We can all hope it would be a couple of days, right, to all involved, but it's not that way. Typically, as a guideline, HUD will, statutorily, by law, their guideline is 100 days. They would like their matter to be, from the beginning to the end, to be investigated, to all resolution attempts to be done within 100 days. It's about 3 months. And right now, that's basically what we're doing. What we're performing at is either 3 months or less. And it really depends on the nature of the allegations, the cooperation of the parties, the complexity of the case. And so everything's going to be different. And then sometimes you'll have people asking for extensions. You have some people who won't. And sometimes you have witnesses who are available. Sometimes you won't. So it really depends on how long it's going to take. And it also depends on other issues, caseload, other issues going on at the time. But for the most part, we're tasked to do it before 100 days, and we typically do.
We've got a high percentage of our cases that are completed within the 100 days. And then to the point Mark raised about the cooperation of the parties, one of the things that we do is from the outset, when we receive a charge and serve it on the respondent or defendant, we offer mediation. And we have a sterling volunteer mediator who has been able to negotiate a lot of settlements and resolutions in a relatively short manner of time to the satisfaction of both sides. And the nice thing about that is that that's almost literally the one time the parties have control in their own hands. Once that opportunity is passed and our office has to make findings and or it's now in litigation, a lot of the control that you might have been able to bring to the table and form your own unique resolution will be lost, and then it's going to be a judge or a jury that makes a determination about your life or your business. So we really encourage that mediation. That's really important, and I can't underscore that enough.
I know we don't have a whole lot more time, but I thought maybe you could give us kind of a Cliff's Note version of, the service animals and kind of give folks a little bit of a quick education on, what is a service animal and an emotional support animal and the rights associated with those.
Sure. It all began, if you ask me, back in 1988, right, when Congress amended the law to include disability. Well, when they included that right of disability, you have the right to be free from discrimination, they also included request powers to residents of, due to your disability, you may request a change in the rules or a change in the physical environment so that you can live there. Well, little by little, right, that became to include animals. That animals can provide an assistance to your disability. Sometimes they can do the same thing that medicine can do. And so if you have an animal that can do it, and it would start off with a seeing eye dog, right? A hearing dog, an epilepsy dog. Well, then pretty soon you have psychiatric conditions that could benefit from the presence of an animal. Just the mere presence. It can have meaningful or measurable effects on somebody. Lower blood pressure, better health outcomes for the person. Heck, I think you can even Google and look up research on animals, right? Marriages with animals and longevity with animals in people's lives. And it has a measurable difference in people's lives. And so when you have these issues of service animals, as a nutshell, basically you have to have a disability There's got to be reliable verification of a disability. 2, there's got to be some sort of nexus to the animal. That is, what does the animal do for your disability? Now, when we look at these issues, we'll make a determination about whether the animal is actually helping. We look to the medical experts for the most part. They're the ones who know. They're the ones who can determine whether you're disabled or not. They're the ones who can actually write the doctor's note to say what the connection is. Now, the Fair Housing Act does not require that somebody give all your medical records to the housing provider. It just does not require that. And sometimes you have that overreach going on. Right? I mean, or you have the landlord wanting to put a bunch of restrictions on. I want an insurance policy. I want an increase in rental amount. Well, the law clarifies that's not allowed. And so you have situations like that. But for the most part, disabled, and does the animal help your disability in a way that would be meaningful, a nexus, some sort of identifiable relationship to the animal and to your disability. And that's what we do day in and day out, is looking at those types of issues.
So then what does a landlord do if they are they're looking at potentially renting their place to someone who says, I need to let you know that I have a support animal? Mm-hmm. What's the first thing that they should be doing?
Well, they are allowed to ask for documentation in support of that request. But as Mark indicated, they can't ask for a complete medical workup or file. So typically what should happen is the landlord would say, well, help provide documentation attesting to that need and why you need the animal. The complaining party or charging party, the renter, the resident of the association, should then go to their treating provider and get a letter that, 1, discloses a disability, not the disability itself, but that they are a person with a disability, and that, 2, how that animal ameliorates or accommodates the disability and is necessary for that person to enjoy the housing opportunity. If those things are present, then it's incumbent on the housing provider to pretty much allow the animal. The law does. The nice thing about the law is, I know people have misconceptions about the law. It really tries to impose common sense, and it contemplates an interactive process, a dialogue. You're really supposed to, just like we are in our everyday endeavors, we're supposed to talk to people. Right. And so the law contemplates that if you're a person with a disability, you talk to your landlord. And if they don't understand, they talk to you. So hopefully you never have to come to us.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the renter in this situation would need to maybe provide a note from the doctor that just says, this individual really needs to have a service type animal, and it's that simple.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yep.
Yeah. Well, no, and the first move is that the resident has to articulate it to the landlord. The landlord does not have to guess or be psychic, right? I mean, if you have a need in your resident, you bring it to the landlord. And, the Fair Housing Act won't necessarily specify that it has to be a doctor's note or a piece of paper. But what it does is that it attests that there has to be reliable verification of a disability. And in best cases, if it's a legal process or it's going to impact your housing, why not do it in writing? Right? Why not have something in writing that the landlord can put in their file, or somebody can have tangible evidence of what's actually being discussed? So in the event of any dispute, you know what's actually going on.
And we should also mention that we're not just talking about dogs anymore, which is we typically, that's what you think of when you think of a
conception. Yes,
yeah, but that's really changing, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Under the fair, as opposed to the ADA on places of public accommodation where it can only be dogs or miniature horses, and we'll put a pin in miniature horses. In the fair housing context, there is no species restriction. It could be a snake. There have been cases where it's been guinea pigs. So it doesn't necessarily lend itself to restriction to dogs.
Yeah.
Fascinating subject. It really, really is. And, it's great that there are folks like you that are helping people really try to understand their rights and responsibilities, as well as the people who are in the housing profession that, everybody wants to do the right thing. And so thank you for what you do.
Thank you for your time.
We are all out of time, but again, I want to just remind everybody, for more information on the event coming up in April, do check out the website. Mark, you want to give that website one more time?
Well, it's going to be the Pinellas County Office of Human Rights website, and also GTAR, right, the Greater Tampa Area Realtors.
Very good. April 17, you don't want to miss that. We want to thank our guests, Paul Valenti and Mark Esparza with the Pinellas County Office of Human Rights. Of course, a shout out to Pinellas County Communications Department and, of course, WRXB 1590 AM. We sure look forward to having you join us next month. And if you missed any of today's show, you can check out past editions on the website or catch us on YouTube. I'm Jane Merlin.
And I'm Catherine Driver.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Make it a great day.
So how was your day?
It was good. Looks like the kids are having fun.
If you live in Pinellas County, you live in a watershed. A watershed is the water, the land, and everything in between. Make a difference. Keep lawn clippings on the lawn. Pick up after your pets. Put trash in the can. After all, it's your watershed. Watershed, where we live, work, and play. Visit pinellascounty.org/environment to see how you can make a difference.